the 5 p.m. turn here at Ligny Quatre. The situation is getting a little dicey for the Allies. At Quatre, they're in pretty poor shape, and not quite as bad at Ligny. They still have a lot to fight with, but they're starting to show some cracks in their defense. At 5 p.m. we still have not had a thunderstorm anywhere. Our latest ice roll was a 55, so no poor weather has gotten in the way. We'll start with the command phase. As a reminder, we get command points based on army leaders and infantry corps on the field. So for the French, at Quatre, we have Marshal Ney as the army leader and the 2nd Infantry Corps, so 2 command points there. 5 at Ligny, the 3rd and 4th Infantry Corps, 1 for the Imperial Guard, which is essentially a corps, 1 for Napoleon and 1 for Marshal Grouchy. Now, the Anglo-Allies at Quatre aren't represented here because they're a special case. They get a command point based on Wellington moving and activating brigade leaders and his ADCs moving to activate brigade leaders. He can also activate his 2 corps leaders, 1st and reserve, to get another command point. Before undertaking Wellington's ride to determine command points for the Anglo-Allies here at Quatre, I completed the command tracing portion of the command phase. See, the Allies are largely in command. Part of the avant-garde here is out of command with the death of the Duke of Brunswick, and some of the Hanoverians over here, the Dutch Belgians. But largely the main line of resistance is in command. The French, on the other hand, are in pretty poor shape. Have a full brigade of the 6th Division, probably a full brigade of the 9th Brigade Division there. I'm running out of command markers, so I'm using those white X's. So basically this whole central area for the French is going to be out of command. But the rest of the 9th and the 5th Division are still in command, along with the British brigades. It's a similar story here at Ligny. All those white X's are the French units that are now out of command. Basically, that counterattack they launched last turn has spread them out. The only unit that's really in good shape is the 8th Division here, so they'll be prepared to push the attack up into this gap. And the Prussians are largely in command, just a couple of places where it's going to hurt them. Since the 2nd Corps is going to be front and center, the fact that these units right here are going to be in command, now that the Field Marshal is stacked with Perch to activate him, will be the most important thing for the Prussians this turn. But over here in the east, quite a lot of out of command. The French cavalry overextended themselves, so they're largely out of command there. And some of the retreating Prussians also are out of command. So it'll be kind of hard to reform the line over here for the Prussians, and it'll be hard to recall those cavalry that have overrun the Prussians. So with that, we're going to have Wellington undertake his ride. Now his goal is to get to the east side of the crossroads and try to get the British brigades back in shape, but he's so far away. He's right here. Obviously, the brigades are even out of frame. They're way over there. So we're just going to run as fast as we can this direction, stopping long enough to activate the Prince of Orange there. That'll at least get one more command point in the mix for the next turn. Now he has his ADC Gordon with him. I think we're going to make Gordon fly over here to the 3rd Division. Probably I've got the Hanoverian Brigade or the already battered British Brigade. I think I'll activate the Hanoverians. So we'll fly Gordon over to here. And that'll be a command point. And we're going to run Wellington this way. He's going to move forward to there, expend the point to activate Prince of Orange. I don't have any activation chits, so I'm just going to use this maneuver unit to indicate that. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He doesn't get very far. And I didn't want to spend any movement trying to come down here and activate anybody because it just keeps me from getting him where I want him to be, which is across the road, closer to the rest of the British brigades. Now, in the leader movement phase, he will get to move half his movements. That's 5.5 points. So he can get closer, and probably Picton can come back and meet him and get both corps leaders activated, which I should have done like 3 hours ago, but I just kept getting caught up in trying to reform the defense over here. So penny wise and pound foolish. So the harsh price for that carelessness is only a single maneuver unit for the Allies at Quatre. That's going to be pretty rough. I'm going to hopefully swallow my medicine and get better next turn. For the French, they're going to stick with the plan. Keep feeding that command point to the activated 2nd Corps in range of the Marshal there. We're going to spend a command point right here with the 3rd Reserve Cavalry to keep them moving, trying to get on a flank. And we rolled for light cavalry initiative for the 2nd Cavalry Division. And that's just a simple 1-die roll where you take the value, the cavalry value, is that coming in? Can't tell. Which is a 3. Roll a die. If it's 3 or less, you get a command point that can be spent for that leader. So we managed to get initiative. We tried to get initiative for the Dutch-Belgian cavalry, which is also on this Quatre and failed. And the French and the Prussians are a little harder to figure out. Basically, the 3rd Corps is still a good bet. We're going to have to spend a command point here to keep the 10th Division moving because they're not in range of Vendôme. I think it's a little too soon to launch the Guard, even the Young Guard. So opted not to spend the command point there. Where they did spend another command point was again on the 4th Corps here. And to some extent it's going to be continuing the 12th Division's attack, but also trying to reposition and get the 14th Division out of the way to make room for the Guard. It wasn't quite as clear what to do here in the east. We're spending 2 command points to try to recover that cavalry that, ran so far beyond their lines in that charge. That's a lot of command. We rolled for initiative, and those were our last command points. We rolled for initiative here for the 1st Reserve Cavalry, just to try to position them back over here and concentrate along the 2nd Reserve. Now for the Prussians, it's kind of similar. Don't know what to do quite with this division, or the brigade rather, all spread out. I didn't want to spend a command point on them because I didn't think I could get anything out of them. So instead, I put it right over here. That is the 10th Brigade, and they will be able to potentially, if not get across, at least start towards this stream, or maybe even this way, whatever, and start to threaten the French positions there. Additionally, the light cavalry rolled for initiative, so they'll have some possibility to do some damage. Possibly they can get across this brook and threaten the French. The 2nd Corps is now activated, so spending a command point on them was easy. Keeping the 5th Brigade attack going was also a no-brainer. But now what to do with those other 2 command points? Or actually, excuse me, only 1. Sorry, we already spent that other one. We have one more, and I thought, I promised to get that Valiant artillery battery out of there into a measure of safety. I'm going to make that the beginning of the withdrawal of the 1st Corps. So I squandered an entire command point just to get that artillery limbered and out of there. In my luck, they won't even limber and they'll be stuck. But really the 1st Corps, they just don't have any good units. The 2nd Brigade is in decent shape right here. And the 1st and 3rd Brigades are so torn up, there's not much I can do to fight them. So making room for the 2nd Corps is about all I can do with them. So that's where we stand with command. We'll load up the chit cup and start pulling. A slightly less crowded draw cup. The French have a total of 9 chits, but with the lack of command at Quatre, it's only 6 for the Allies. So we'll just draw a first chit. And of course the French gain the advantage. So that'll be effectively another back-to-back move for the French. They moved 2nd last turn, so they'll move 1st this turn. Start with the French charge phase. And yes, I'm going to undertake yet another charge with the cavalry, because that's all they're good for. Nothing to screen here. They're either meleeing or waste of space. I think I'm going to throw the Lancers and these 2 chasseurs, and their ultimate prize is going to be the Brunswick Hussars and those tired Uhlans right there. So, I don't know if we're going to get any kind of a reaction charge here. I think we'll give a shot at it. Despite their pretty good morale, they failed the reaction charge. So we are going to drive home first one, and then the other regiment. Now this is not in a zone of influence since they're in line facing this direction. So I can charge them right past. And then my final charge will be the Lancers hitting the Uhlans. So then, since this is cavalry on cavalry, there won't be any defensive fire. We can just move straight to melee. Now, without going to the bother of doing any math, I think this is going to end up being about a 1.5 to 1 between these 2 regiments and those hussars. And the French leader has a +3 modifier. Well, 2 French regiments are not the equal of 1 Brunswicker. We basically rolled a blank, so that will be a bounce and a casualty and morale check for all 3 of these regiments. So that's about 4 movement points, plus the increment loss. We'll check morale for the Brunswick first. And he does pass, so he will stay right there and become tired. The French have to cross the sunken road there, or they have to retreat, I think, in front of those guns. Either way, I don't like it. So he's going to take a loss and check morale. The 6th also passed the morale check, so they will end. I should probably check to see if they're allowed to occupy that hex. Yeah, I don't think there's any prohibition. So we'll take our last casualty and morale check. And he was going to pass simply because the general was riding along with him. So, I don't know, the French cleared some space, but cost them a little bit more than they wanted to pay, I think. I'll just mark these guys with their charge markers. Now we have one more attack here. These lancers against those who are already tired. So that's going to be a much higher odds attack. It's going to end up being 5-1. Roll the defender disorder, but that'll cost them an increment, and they'll actually rout away. Way out of frame. So the French will enter the vacated hex and they'll be exhausted. They will probably be ejected shortly, but the Moulins retreated back to there. So, created some space. Left one regiment here. We'll be moving him in the rest of the movement phase. I don't think we have any other charges to do, so we'll just continue with movement. Starting at Quatre, there really wasn't much we could do here. Far west. We moved that horse battery up just to maybe stiffen that line a little bit, but I already know the 3rd Division is going to come pouring over there sooner or later. All of this area couldn't move. They were all out of command. Got us to the 9th Division. Several rolls of closes failed, but we had a couple of battalions back there that were able to fill the gap. We're going to try to hit that flank there pretty hard so they can dislodge those British battalions. I carelessly left another regiment out of command. Didn't notice it, but they were too far away, could not move. So the grand plan to envelop that flank failed due to mismanagement of the command. So we just moved some battalions up to get some fire on those British. That was really the only movement we had here at Quatre. Over at Ligny, we tried to get the 10th Division moving here on the left, putting some assaults on a couple of those 5th Brigade units, the battalions of the 25th Regiment there. Otherwise, a lot of out-of-command units meant we couldn't move too much. Tried to get a few in position to put some fire on those disordered battalions. And then the 11th Division got a successful roll to close, good for them, and an assault there. The remnants of the 1st Brigade. The 8th Division is trying to pour across the stream here. They were able to get one assault on a 3rd Brigade battalion back there, but otherwise they weren't that successful. They had a failed roll to close there, but another one is going to go in. But otherwise they were just getting themselves across the stream. The 12th Division here, the 4th Corps, is launching a few assaults, and since we squandered a command point on that artillery, we're going to go ahead and try to hit it one last time. See if somebody can get those guys knocked out. Otherwise, the big movement was to just get the 14th Division, that battered 14th Division, out of the way. He moved right in this area right here. The 1st Reserve Cavalry, the 5th Division there, they pivoted just to solidify the flank there of the 2nd Reserve Cavalry against that light Prussian cavalry. We extricated 2 of our regiments of those dragoons. One took 2 casualties due to opportunity fire, and also knocked the leader, which was one of the ADCs for the reserve cavalry, out, but only for 3 turns, so no great loss there. We have 2 more ADCs where that one came from. So that will conclude the movement portion of this chit, and we'll go ahead and move right on to the fire phases. Defensive fire here at Quatre. Here in the 3rd Division, we basically have these 3 battalions here, and that leader, and the avant-garde plus the Liebe battalion here, the Brunswick. They can get some shots off, so we'll roll some dice. Not great, inflicted a casualty here, but they passed their morale check, so no one was displaced in this first area. Moving to the east, going to have the Brunswick firing here, as well as here. Then down the road we'll have the British brigades. These 2 units can fire skirmisher, and then 1 battalion. All that powder and ball, and we inflicted 2 casualties. Here and here. Had no morale checks, so did not push anyone back. It's really disappointing we were not able to get any casualties here, meaning these attacks are going to go in pretty effectively. Now, at Ligny, there's just a boiling cauldron of fire going on here, basically all along this line. We'll even have some defensive fires extending over to here. This artillery will try to stand yet again, and going all the way to the 2nd Brigade of the 1st Corps here. That's going to be a lot of dice. We'll just look at the results. Well, Prussian musketry wasn't that great. Got a couple of increment losses, but that artillery unit, yet again, firing their canister, was able to inflict casualties on their attackers. So that'll weaken that battalion when they go in for their assault. Otherwise, across the rest of the line, no real damage. Here on the east side of the field, the only attack we have are these 2 squares, 2 Landwehr units underneath them, firing at that cavalry unit. This is one of those pains in the neck. Okay, there's 8 increments and 7 increments. Their final multiple in square is 1.5, then divided by 3. That's going to end up being basically a 1-to-1 attack, so we'll just throw the dice. And that's why you throw the dice first. If the dice aren't high enough, it's not worth the bother to figure out the actual odds. We got pretty good dice, 61, and that will cause a casualty on those guys. Morale check is passed, so that will complete defensive fire. Turning around for offensive fire, staying over here on the east side, the French have these 3 batteries of horse artillery all sighted in on those squares. So we'll see if those targets give up any casualties. All 3 squares took casualties, so good work by the gunners. These 2, this one did not need a morale check. This one passed its morale check. They're very safe and comfortable in that square, so they passed. But this one has a morale of 34, and even with the square benefit, they still failed. So they will disorder. Now, since they moved involuntarily, it'll trigger another morale check on the square next to them. But they pass. They're happy in their square, so they're okay. We'll just move to the west here. Firing the French all along the line here, right up to this area. Put casualty markers on all the spots that took casualties, but those who had morale checks all passed. But a couple of good spots where the assaults are going in where they had some casualties. Here on the western side did the same thing. Marked each of the places that occurred a casualty, but this one also failed its morale check. And this is that thing where if I fail my morale check and have to retreat, and it's not from an involuntary movement through melee result, I'm stuck inside of the zones of influence, and therefore he's destroyed. He's basically completely surrounded, and he's dead. That's a tough one for the Prussians. We're going to get that entire battalion out of there. That was a pretty decent line battalion of 5 increments remaining. That's what those back-to-back moves will do. They thought they were in good position, and then they got swallowed up. Continuing moving west at Quatre here, the British brigades east of the crossroads took 3 casualties, but only 1 morale check and passed it. West of the crossroads, pretty effective fire against those Brunswick units, but even with all those casualties, they do pass their morale checks that came up. And the final 2 fires here by the line infantry are ineffective, no casualties. So that will conclude our fire phases, and we'll just move on to our melee. We have 1 melee to resolve here at Quatre, and the British are definitely in real danger. These 3 battalions are assaulting them, but they also have this unit behind them. Now I think that's probably a break because they're inside of this walled farm. So if these guys have to retreat, I believe they can do so, because effectively that acts like a square, so its zone of influence doesn't impede movement. That's how I'm interpreting it anyway. So I'm going to figure the odds here and roll some pre-melee morale checks. Well, not surprisingly, this depleted battalion, assaulted from 3 directions in the flank, failed to stand. So we're going to retreat him. I think I'm going to be generous and assume that he can retreat past that farm there. I think I will move this unit, occupy the hex. I think consolidation only applies when there's a melee. Since this wasn't a melee, it was a pre-melee morale check. I don't have to consolidate. I'll move over to Ligny. I don't think there's any such thing as assaulting into a hex vacated by a morale check failure during the fire phases, so he doesn't go anywhere. But we do have this French unit assaulting here. This was actually a very poor attack. They're likely to go to melee and lose. But we're trying to get some morale check failures there. One thing to note that this unit did pivot to meet that oncoming unit. That's a rule that is permitted in the 5th edition. Well, probably mercifully, the French do fail their pre-melee morale check. So we will retreat them. Beats taking a loss in melee. Well, further to the east we have these 2 French assaulting that Fusilier battalion, and he could not pivot because he was already faced by this unit here. So when this one assaulted, he was basically jammed in. So that'll also be a 2-to-1 melee, pre-melee morale check odds. Both sides pass a pre-melee morale check, the final odds are 3.5 to 1, and the dice yield the defender rout. So that'll be a single casualty. I think they have a path this way. I'll get them into, actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I got to do one more. I could take them right here to 8. So they're routed, and they have to check morale. So the stack will pass this morale check, so this guy will displace one more hex. I think I'll displace him into the trees. That's the point of a rout, to get to cover. I do have to consolidate here. I had to consult my stacking chart to make sure I could get that many increments into the hex. And the fact that we have a leader means they will be able to stack together. So we're going to move both these guys into that hex. I'm going to put the 12th Regiment on top. Well, while we're here, we'll hit this guy. This is a very weak Landwehr battalion. He's down to 1 increment. Very high odds for the pre-melee morale check, and they do fail that check, so they will retreat. And get him back, I think, to here. And we'll advance. And shifting a little further to the east, we'll have a couple more attacks here. Down here in the corner. And then these 2 units. Those skirmishers, and they're going to retreat. And then finally, one more assault on those guns. We're going to get them this time. But first we start down here. This is a 2 to 1 attack against this disordered unit. And he fails to stand. So, where can he retreat? Zone of influence, zone of influence, zone of influence. You get 1 hex here. He can't move towards the enemy. He's got to move away. Basically, there's just nowhere for him to go. So, that's another destroyed battalion. Pinched off that corner pretty effectively in the end. Here, these skirmishers are going to retreat. I think they'll move right to there. And we will advance. This battalion, kind of pretty tough shape there. I retreated those skirmishers because I figured they were just going to take a casualty anyway. And then I'd have this unit surrounded. But we'll go ahead and do their pre-melee morale check. But a little bit of luck for the Prussians. It is a larger formation, and that gave them good odds, so they passed. And the French failed, so they will have to retreat. Disorder and retreat. Rough attacking so close to a streamline. Now we come to our final attack on those Prussian guns. We have 3 increments of French infantry remaining against the 2 of the guns. This time the pre-melee morale checks are both passed, so we will head to melee. Okay, that's the first for me. Had a 1.5 to 1 attack, rolled a blank, so that's 1 increment loss for each side, and a morale check. Haven't had that happen with artillery before. So we'll check morale for each side. I'll put loss markers to remember. And they both pass. So that means they go to a second round of melee. They'll recalculate the odds and fight some more. This somehow seems fitting. Recalculated odds are 2.5 to 1, and the French achieve a defender disorder. So those guns fought stubbornly right to the end. Even though they're now destroyed, they definitely took their fair share of French along with them. So I will pick up the guns, squander that command point. Well, I don't know. Command point stays with the leader, right? So we'll relocate him here to the howitzers. And we will advance the French into that vacated hex, having sustained 2 casualties to take those guns. So overall, that was a pretty effective melee phase for the French. They have further disrupted and really opened up this corner of the field here. I have to advance this guy into that hex, but that should do it for melee. We'll move on and do the French reorganization. One French unit failed to recover here at Quatre. Probably most importantly, the ammunition wagons were successfully refilled. They're getting dangerously low, to the point where those guns wouldn't be able to keep firing. That was the most important thing to happen over here. Over at Ligny, the 7th Division, not surprisingly, wasn't able to rally. Only one unit right there did. The other units that had a little bit of disorder to them, over here in the 3rd Corps, did manage to rally. So they're in pretty good shape over here. Interestingly, this unit right there is a battalion of the 14th Division that is routed. The Marshal Soult went out to rally them, and they refused to respond to his exhortations and carried him along on their route all the way back to the town. But otherwise, we ended up over here with a little bit of readiness recovery, but otherwise leaving things as they are when we finish the turn. Now we'll just go on with our next chit draw.